Welcome to the This Week I'm Into podcast. This week we're talking about photography. I'm your co-host, Pete Tyler. Later on in the episode, we'll have my friend from high school, Kernan Fritsch, join us to talk about his experience with photography and specifically film photography. But right now, I'm with my friend and co-host, Paul Imbruglia. Paul, how are you doing?
I feel like I'm in one of the movies today, Hans.
Oh,
All on an audio
pod.
Yeah, I'm on an audio podcast, but take a photo of me. Click.
Oh, click. Oh, it looks good, man. Great smile.
Thanks. I have a face for podcasting.
Amen, brother. I'm with you. Paul, thank you for your astounding intro there. Bringing the energy today. Let's hop into it. Do you have any experience with photography?
Well, my phone camera has been getting better over the years, if that means anything. But no, I don't take photos. I'll actually give you this little tidbit, and this is actually kind of genius. So I don't take any photos of myself, of my family, of whatever.
Do you leave that up to whoever you're traveling with, or like whoever they will take the photos and send it to you?
Exactly. Not only that, I don't have an iPhone, so cancel me now. But I don't even ask people to send me photos because they just come in blurry. So I just live life in the moment.
Oh, Paul, what are you gonna do in like 40 years if you have children, grandchildren? They're like, let's see photos. You're gonna be like, they're all blurry.
I'll share them this, and then just have them imagine. No, so I'm so bad at it, but here's what happens. My sister obviously likes a bunch of photos taken, really just of her. So what she'll do is I'll stand where she's going to be. She'll hold up the camera and like angle it and put the height correct. And then I'll go over, take the phone out of her hand and not move it. I'll just take the photo.
Okay, so she has the artistic eye. So she frames it, holds it still, and then she's like, Paul, don't move it exactly right here.
Because there's a slightly more difficult version of she takes the photo of me and says, I want the photo to look like that. This is taking it a step further where I don't even get to see it. I just hold the phone.
Okay. It sounds like she knows your strengths and weaknesses and is just helping you out where you might need a little help. Is that fair?
It's considerate, honestly. It's all, and I'm one of those people where like if someone comes over and says like, "Hey, can you take a picture of me?" I say no.
Yeah.
Like you don't want that.
Well,
ask somebody else.
That's so funny you bring that up. I was going to say, Paul, let me paint a scene for you. You're in a new country. You're outside a gorgeous church. Or structure, and lots of tourists around. You just took a photo with your family, and now the group that just took your photo turns around, gives you their camera, and asks you specifically, hey, will you take our photo? How do you feel in that moment?
I feel awkward, and I hand the phone to my sister.
I do the same thing.
I say, actually, she would do a lot better job. Yeah. You know what's so awful? This is another side fact. My mom likes to take a lot of photos, right? Mm-hmm. I don't like to take photos. My dad doesn't really like to take photos. And I don't think my sister really likes to take family photos. But what we had to do, because my mom would take so many selfies, is we capped her. She gets 2 photos a day, family photos, anywhere she wants, anytime, right? But you get 2. We give exceptions if it's like something like really cool or like everyone's into it. But if it's just like one of those like, hey, can we take a photo? No, 2. You don't need them all. And if you know my mom, she's going to post them on Facebook. So you got to make them good.
There's an argument to be made there that the photos become more special.
Exactly.
On the flip side, you might be missing out on moments, if she's
I live the moments, Hans. I live the moments.
Okay. All right.
I bet, are you one of those people that videotapes concerts and fireworks shows? That drives me insane.
Well, yeah, I mean, like every weekend, I just go through my fireworks folder and just watch all the videos I've ever taken.
Okay, as long as you're watching them back, that's the only the only problem.
No,
I didn't want to watch.
I'm totally with you. I don't take videos of fireworks because that does not make sense to me. Because they're fun to watch in person, so just be there in person. And then they're awful to watch on your phone, so don't take a video. I'm going off on a tangent here, but I'm with you. I'm also one of those guys, Paul, that if I ever do take photos, which I will say is also fairly rare for me, I'm same as you. Like in the family, I probably have the least artistic eye. My brother's a really good photographer, so he's the one who's always setting up the stuff. And then he'll ask my mom, and then me and my dad are kind of tied for don't ask us. But I'm that guy, like if I'm setting up for a photo, I will like click it 1,000 times.
Just in case.
Yeah. Just hope one of them is good, which like is to the absolute like peevement of my brother and anyone else who's ever taken a good photo. They will hate that.
Okay, here's a question for Jans.
Yeah,
and to get us back on track, because I think a lot of what we've said is we don't like taking photos, but I do enjoy looking at good photography.
I agree. 100%.
Is there a genre of photography, and I know that's pretty vague, so work with it as you will, of like photographs that you like to look at?
So happy you brought this up, because I actually have this on my own. Like I wanted to talk to you about this, but I, above anything else, love the wildlife photography. And also like second place, very, very close second, actually maybe first, it depends, but the like geography based photography, new locations are like really interesting, rock structures, really interesting geology. Love that stuff. And I remember, I think it's all digital now, but back when National Geographic printed things, I'm not sure if they
print
magazines anymore. But they would come out like I think once a year with an issue that had pictures of the year, and they were just like gorgeous pictures. And I remember looking at the wildlife photos, and like they're just incredible. And the stories behind them were like photographers who capture them will literally go out for days and just wait in the same spot again and again.
Oh yeah.
And eventually get lucky that like, a rare lynx like crosses their path or something. But it was always incredibly impressed with me, the background stories, and of course the photos themselves are absolutely beautiful. But with that in mind, Paul, do you have a specific category you like to review?
I'd say mine are pretty similar. I really like up close nature things, but I'd say specifically like floral stuff. Like I like the landscapes when they're just like so many different colors and stuff. Like imagine like a big field of like wildflowers, but I'm thinking like specifically of some where it's like flowers like really up close and you can see like water droplets like coming off of them, or like a little like bug that's like crawling around. Like I think those are super cool. I also like city skylines.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. What city has the most beautiful skyline?
Well, it's Seattle, but...
Oh, it's Chicago, but go ahead.
No, okay, well, whatever. Anyways.
Sorry. Yeah, I interrupted. Keep going.
Anyways, yeah, like those kind of like pulled out shots where you kind of see like the whole skyline and then some of the, whatever is in the background, like nature-wise, whether it's like the lake or mountains or something like that. It's pretty cool. I feel like it just kind of like brings good vibes when I'm looking at it, right? Like I feel like that's how people feel about paintings, which is not really me, but when I really like the like realistic view of my area, and I'm like, oh, that's brings me a lot of joy.
Talking about, the details, the dew falling off the lilies and everything, like it's really incredible what those like, well, not only incredibly talented photographers, but like the incredibly advanced technology, right, of the cameras that can capture that dewdrop. So combination of both the skills of the photographer and the technology of the camera have just been able to create these just sublime scenes. So I'm totally with you there.
Yeah. And then I'm not super like knowledgeable about camera technology, but I'm sure they've gotten crazy. But like with how high definition or whatever, how many, pixels you're getting per inch, whatever the stat is. But I also think it's really cool the kind of effects that you can get in not just like editing photos, but like truly like how you're taking them. I think I watched this pretty cool video about that one Harry Styles album cover that looks like it's kind of like globed because of like the way they like I think reflected something off of a mirror. Okay. So people are pretty creative in like how to get like I don't know if they're called like natural effects, but instead of like computer edited, right? Like you can take photos with like real world adjustments to make it look different.
Yeah,
which
like
I think is pretty neat.
Almost like practical effects and
practical effects. Totally what I meant to say. Yep.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. The other thing that reminds me of is like the long exposure photographs where like, you know, you're pointed up at space or the northern lights and you just, you know, you're holding your camera in the same position for extended periods of time. And then you just get these insane pictures of like the Milky Way, like the entire, you know, galaxy above. Like, yeah, that's insane that your camera can pick that up. You know, both the skilled photographer and the camera's ability to actually kind of combine that long exposure effect into producing these amazing images that you can't see with your naked eye either.
Yeah, that's what I use for fireworks, actually.
I'll say I'm triggered from that. Normally, Paul, I ask you, what is this thing we're learning? But I think it'd be kind of silly to explain what is photography.
Yeah, can we talk about aperture and...
Yeah, like that's way beyond me. I remember aperture questions from physics E&M, but I don't ever want to go back to that.
That was really the only camera term I knew, so I said it.
I'll just say photography is more than just the camera taking the picture. You have to like, it's very artistic, right? There's a whole realm behind it of like, as an artist, you have to have an idea. You may be, you know, a stylist. You might have a certain way you want to spin things, your own kind of spin. You may be like a strategist. For example, if you're a wildlife photographer, you have to be strategic, right, about where you're going and how you're going to get these insane shots. And then on top of that, there's also, you have to have some sort of like technical aptitude with the camera. A lot of them are really highly skilled with editing software, in the sense like you can make a legit career out of all these skills combined. So that is all I want to say. I think it's silly to explain what photography is, but just know it's more than just the camera, go and click, right? I did see there was, if you're taking good photos, there's some pretty famous competitions you can enter into and get like a pretty penny for it, including the International Photography Awards.
Who's the guy who gets photos of Spider-Man? Do you think he would have won that?
What's his name? Like Jonas Jameson or something like that? Jonah Jameson.
The most famous photographer of all time.
The Daily Bugle.
Who couldn't catch a break because Spider-Man was taking photos of himself.
Dude, I'm upset with myself. I can't remember his name. I think it's some play on that, but but yeah, that's the, you know, he offers a reward. So, you know, similar to that, parallel in the real world, you can get a reward for good photography, including different categories of fine art, architecture, people, nature, advertising, moving images, editorials, events, sports, and deeper perspective. Those are some of the categories. Do any of those jump out at you?
No particular one. And I'll be honest, I spaced out a little bit, but I think whatever category this would fall under, because what I think really does stand out to me is whatever kind of photos tells a story. I watch a lot of Vox videos, and I think they do this really well. I don't know if there's a specific series under Vox, but I think a lot of their stories like reference like old photos, and I think it adds a lot of helpful context for me as a viewer to kind of like see those like older photos, and it kind of gives you like a glimpse into the life of people that you can only kind of read about otherwise. Obviously it only stems back so far, but I think, you know, when you see a photo, like it provides a lot more context to your story or your whatever you were saying about it.
Yeah.
That I think whatever that category is, like that would really stand out for me, because I assume that like it's to your wildlife story point, right? Like when you see the photo, like that's one thing, but the story behind it coupled with that photo like makes it feel a lot more 100%, impactful.
100%.
I don't know if that's a category, but that's what I was thinking about. So sorry if I derailed you.
You're all good, Paul. Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you there. I do have some fun facts for you, but before we get there, is there anything else you want to touch on?
No, let's get into Hans's fun facts. Hans's fun facts.
Fun facts with Hans.
Yeah.
Beautiful. This is interesting. If we just break down the etymology of the word photography, photo, light, graph, to draw, photography literally means to draw with light. So
wow.
I don't know how fun of a fact you consider that, but I'm also, beyond being a geography nerd, I'm also a word nerd. So I thought that was kind of beautiful.
I hope that comes up again.
Okay. An aperture on a camera effectively operates the same way as a human eye. It changes size to focus light onto the retina, or in the case of the camera, the film. Fair enough?
Ooh.
Yeah. So, art mimics life, or in this case, technology mimics biology. Your camera is basically just a fancy eyeball.
I love that. I was just watching a YouTube video about Kodak and their first portable cameras. Did you watch that video?
Really? Wait, you watched a video about Kodak? What did you learn?
Yeah.
That's my next fun fact.
Oh, well, it was about their original cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were watching this video about Kodak, and they were creating, I don't know if they were the first portable cameras, but I think they were probably the first mainstream portable cameras, called the Brownie. Okay. You could take like 6. The first one was take circular photos, and you could take maybe somewhere between 6 and 24, I think.
Okay.
And then you like shipped it out, kind of like how you expect disposable rolls now to do. You have to ship it out to somewhere.
Oh, for them get to be developed, and then they'd send it back. Interesting.
Yeah, and then they made a new one, which was square photos, and it was, I think they said like an equivalent dollars to us today. This Brownie costed, the first one was like $800, but the second one was only like $34. So it became way more available to people.
Yep.
Because they started advertising that second one to like lower wage people, so more people could buy it. And that's when you see a lot more photographs of like people's lives. Because before you get a lot of like, you had to like get into a room and have like a professional like take your photo, and it's a lot of people like sitting there looking all fancy. But now it's just like, anybody can just walk on the street and just snap a photo. So you get a lot more like candid photography after that. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, that's really Kodak. And then they're obviously like basically out of business now because, they didn't keep up. But yeah, the Brownie. It's something worth looking up. There's a really cool Vox video on it.
Paul,
yeah, I recommend.
You brought the fun facts today. I like that story.
Yeah, it's a really good video. I recommend.
Okay.
And that's kind of what led me to say that thing earlier about the, how like photos like influence stories. I'm sure that was probably one of the start of those kind of photos, because you get a lot of like candid, like everyday stories being able to be told because of that, as opposed to portraits and things like that, which I think are a little less telling.
I agree. Okay. My next fact was about Kodak. I liked your Kodak fact better.
No. What's your Kodak fact? Maybe it'll build.
The company Kodak, founded by George Eastman in 1888. I don't know if they said that in your Vox video. Mr. Eastman was asked, why name it Kodak? Where does that come from? And Eastman claims that the word Kodak just had no meaning behind it. He said that the letter K seemed a strong, incisive letter. And that's where the origin of the name Kodak comes from.
Well, they haven't stayed as strong and decisive, I guess.
Yeah, that's
Yikes.
Definitely true.
The video is claiming that Kodak didn't do as well because they didn't buy into digital photography, I believe, as early as some of their competitors. But it's funny because you used to have to ship off your film. Mm-hmm. It would get developed and then sent back. Then they started doing that like quick printing, right? Like you go to like a random store on a city block and they have like CVS. 1 hour printing. Yeah. But they don't do that anymore. Most don't. You still have to ship them off again if you get a disposable.
Okay. It's a U.
Yeah, it's become too niche now.
Okay.
So yeah, you have to send them out. Unless you can do them yourself, Kodak. I guess. But
I feel like they should have kept up with the times there, because I feel like iPhone kind of just replaced all chances of, more manual photography. But
but it's funny because as of maybe 2015, I feel like what do they call those? They're not disposable. They're the ones that like quick print.
Oh,
your
Polaroid,
photo. Like Polaroids.
Yeah.
And
Polaroid existed before that, obviously,
but coming back huge now. It's like I don't know if it's trendy, but people love it, and people love the look. Dude, where Polaroids are coming up? Big weddings. 3 weddings I've been to.
Oh yeah.
All of them have like take a Polaroid and then like put it on our wedding guest book. Which is great. I think it's pretty cool.
I think that totally makes sense. That's a great idea for a wedding because then you capture in the moment and the bride and groom make sure that they actually get the photo. So,
yep.
Yeah, I think I would call it pretty trendy right now. I think it's very in. I got a couple more fun facts for you here, Paul. Are you familiar? We talked about Kodak. We talked about Polaroid. Are you familiar with the camera company Leica?
Not Leica.
Okay, not like a lot or like a little.
I like a Leica.
But so Leica is their very famous camera brand, and they're kind of known for higher end stuff. And they're a German company, but a vintage Leica from the early 1990s just became the most expensive camera ever sold at an auction. This was in 2022. It was sold for, do you want to guess?
$250,000.
$14.4 million.
No, see, that's people have too much money. That's fake.
I know. That's
you probably can't even take a photo with it.
Yeah.
How many Allentown, Texas stadiums is that?
That's always our equivalent now.
Now that's how I'm basing all of my values off of. Screw goldfish.
Wait, what episode did that come from? The Allentown facts?
The sports.
The U Sports, right. Yeah, so now we always compare to Allentown football. But anyway, this was at the Lights photography auction, which is in Germany. It takes place twice a year. It's considered to be the world's largest and most renowned auction for vintage cameras and other optical equipment, sold for $14.4 million. I think that is absolutely insane. People, like you said, have too much money. Don't know what to do with it.
You can give it to me. If anyone's curious, I will take it.
We'll put Paul's Venmo in the episode bio.
I take anywhere from $0 to 14 million or more. I don't want to cap it in case anyone's feeling generous.
All right, Paul, I got one more for you. You ready for it? If you
can't contain myself,
wanted to guess, what do you think is the world's most viewed photograph?
Most viewed photograph?
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it's a gimmick on Instagram, and it was an egg or something like that. Or is that? Do you know what I mean? Do you
I know what you're talking about. So okay, total tangent, but I think
it was like a Kylie Jenner post or something, right? That like someone was trying to beat. It used to be, or like one of the Kardashians had like the highest post.
Yeah,
and someone was like, "Let's beat it with an egg.
Let's beat like Kim Kardashian's post or something," and it got so many likes. Oh, that's so funny. That is okay. Tangent. That was a good guess. But just in general, the most viewed photograph ever is the Windows XP default wallpaper.
Oh, come on. Oh, because it is a real photo.
Because it's a real photo. The photo itself is called Bliss. It comes from Sonoma Hills, California. The photographer was named Charles O'Rear, who uploaded them to a program called Corbis, which is a stock photo and image licensing site founded by Bill Gates. A few years later, he got the call from Microsoft asking to use his shot of the Sonoma County Hills as the default background for his newest operating system, which is why everyone is familiar with that, the green grass, the blue sky, the white clouds. I feel like everyone who's listening to this podcast can picture what I'm talking about. Everyone is familiar with that Windows XP default photograph.
For sure. That's. I hope he got paid handsomely for that. Maybe $14 million.
I really have no clue. I hope he gets royalties or something, because otherwise, if they bought his stock image for like $5, then geez.
It's
opportunity.
They have like rotating home screens now. I have never changed my default Windows like background, and they have like rotating ones that are kind of cool because they'll ask you questions like, where is that? Yeah, but the I don't know. I think it was Windows 8 where it was just like a weird Windows logo with like some blue shiny lights. They really need to go back to the Windows XP.
I'm down for it. You want to start a petition for it?
Change.org.
We can do it together. Any resources you want to give a shout out to, Paul?
I'd like to give a shout out to my sister for holding the phone where I should need to hold it.
Okay, well then, can I jump on that? Like, I'd like to give a shout out to my brother for being the photographer of the family. So
Yeah, you can totally copycat.
Okay, I'm copycatting. I just also give a shout out to National Geographic. Their photos of the year of 2023 are posted online. They're free to look at. They're absolutely beautiful. Two of my favorites were this beautiful shot of a herd of reindeer that was being fostered by Inuit herders. It's a 4,000 reindeer large herd in this snowy landscape. Absolutely beautiful. And then one other one I wanted to focus on specifically was about the flight of the monarch butterflies. This one was in Mexico. The photographer who got this beautiful shot of a forest. If you're not paying attention, it just looks like a forest with leaves. But if you look in closer, all the leaves are actually butterflies, and there's like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of butterflies.
Oh, that's sick.
That picture. Really interesting photo. So if you are just sitting around right now, I highly recommend just look up National Geographic Pictures of the Year 2023. Give it a look. It's beautiful photos.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll give Vox a shout out. I normally don't do the shout outs, but I think Vox is great. You could look up the Kodak video, but they have so many videos that are related to photos or contain them in them. So
yeah, I'm going to give that Kodak video a watch. That actually sounds
I'll send it to you. It's great.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so with that in mind, we'll have Kernan Fritsch.
Wait. I have it. Okay, let's see how I can word this. Okay, how about, all right, Hans, with that said, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and this is an audio podcast, so we should probably stop talking and bring Kernan on.
Beautiful. Thank you, Paul. So with that in mind, we'll bring Kernan Fritsch on after the break.
Click.
Welcome back, everyone. Now joining us, we have my friend from high school, Kernan Fritsch, to talk about his passion on photography. Kernan, how are you doing?
Oh, Hans, I'm doing really well. I guess you go by Peter Hans on this.
I go by both.
You go by both?
Wait, do you call him Peter or do you call him Hans?
I call him Hans.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. It's either's choice on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, sweet. Well, Hans and Paul, thank you for having me here. I'm super excited.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast, Kernan. The way we usually kind of like to start this is just, would you mind giving a background about yourself and a background about how you got into this hobby?
Yeah, dude, totally. So I am from Boise, Idaho, just like Hans is. We actually met for the first time when we were just wee lads hanging out at Will Tate's house. Great time.
This is true.
But yeah, so I grew up in Boise, Idaho. And I went to school at Boise State University, got a degree in social work, moved out here to Portland. Now I'm currently a behavior technician working one-on-one with kids with autism. And in my free time, I like to play video games. I like to go to the gym, and I like to do film and photography, which is why you guys had me here today.
Yes.
I do some digital too. I mean, everyone walks around nowadays with a digital camera in their pockets on their cell phone. So every once in a while, I'll whip that out and do that. But yeah, back in, let's see, what was it? Right after I graduated high school around, it's so funny because I've been following your guys' podcast and you guys talk about Stranger Things a lot for one reason or the other.
Yeah.
Yes.
When you had your D&D one, you talked about it there, which is absolutely relevant. But when I watched Stranger Things, I took a real interest in, it was Jonathan Byers? Yeah, because he was really into the film photography in the
That's
show.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And he was following around, he had the darkroom set up, he had it all. And so I finished the first season, and I was like, I've also really liked your guys' podcast because as a collector of hobbies myself, it's always fun to hear about new ones and get involved. And I would always love trying, growing up, I would always try different hobbies, whether it be yo-yoing, magic tricks. What else? I even played around with butterfly knives for a while. So I'm always looking for new hobbies, looking for something to do, fill my time. And
that's a new one for us, the butterfly knives. Yeah.
Oh, dude, they're crazy. They're just
Can I see both of your hands, please? How many fingers do you have left?
They're fine. Actually, it was so funny. When I was a kid, my parents never let me get an actual sharp one, so I had to get one of the toy fake ones.
They have toy fake ones.
Yeah, they're just the same setup, but just not a sharp blade. So that way, when you practice all the tricks and stuff, you don't lose a finger. But yeah. So I watched Stranger Things, and then I saw that, and I was like, that looks pretty fun. I wonder what kind of camera he was. And I just went on Amazon. And I went on Google and I'm like, what camera does Jonathan Byers use in Stranger Things?
Nice.
And then I found it on Amazon for $150. And I was like, that seems like a deal. So then I just ordered it. And I was just like, I just dove head first into it. And after like I played around with my first roll, I remember I got this one shot where I was just like, whoa, this looks really cool. And part of the reason that it was so rewarding was with film photography, like it's not like digital or your phone, which is what I've been used to. When like you take the photo, you can immediately see it. So, like you have to go through the whole roll, take it off, or develop it yourself, or send it to a lab to get developed. And then once it's done developing, you get the mystery back, right? And whether you did it right or did it wrong, you'll see in the post, like if you overexposed it, underexposed it, and it's kind of like that mystery and you wait to pay off. And then even if you get a roll back, like this has happened to me where I've gotten rolls back where I did not like a single photo on there. But in the time that it was getting developed, I was already out shooting another roll. So I never felt like it was too discouraging because I'm always like, well, I might as well, even though I didn't like anything on this, I'm still going to finish off the roll I'm shooting, see what's on that. And by the time I develop that roll, there's normally 1 or 2 shots on that one I like. And then it just keeps pushing me forward. And it's a really great self-motivating tool.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
That's
basically my history with it. And so that was back in like 2017 is when I started. And I definitely don't do it as much as I used to, but it's still something I like to practice every now and then when I have a roll and I'm doing something worth shooting.
It's definitely like a really unique skill to develop because your feedback is always delayed, right? Like you have to go develop it and then you see how the shoot actually went. So could you just maybe talk a little bit about that process, like the developing itself and then how you incorporate that feedback into like your next shoot?
Yeah, totally. So I'm pretty much self-taught. In high school, I took like one photography course. And I learned mainly just like the basics of like how to use a camera. And it was really great. But we didn't do anything with the development. And then it wasn't until college when I actually got a chance to develop it myself. And I've only ever done it the one time because it's a really delicate process. Basically, what you have to do is if you've ever seen a 35 millimeter canister of film, you'll know it's like this big and like it has to be dark. Otherwise, you ruin the exposure because once light hits the film, it exposes it. And if you just let light expose the whole thing, the shots are ruined. So you have to go into, there's a common misconception, I think, with film photography where people think you need an entire dark room. But you only need an entire dark room if you're making prints from the film negative. And the film negative is that piece of film from the camera that captured the initial shot. However, if you're just developing, all you need is a bag that you can put your hands in that's completely sealed off because you just need to pop the film canister open, unspool the film from the film canister into this on another spool, basically. And you take this spool and you put it in a light sealed container, and then you start running these chemicals through it and you give it this chemical bath to bring out the photos from it, essentially. And that's the development process. So the hardest part is definitely without being able to see the film, taking it off the spool or taking it off the roll and putting it onto the spool. But once you do that, as long as you do the chemicals right, then you get these, you get to develop your own film. And it's a really cool process. So like you need 3 different chemicals to do the bath. So you'll feed it through once. I forget the names because I've only done it the one time, unfortunately. But it's basically just like washing it. You put it in, you shake up the canister, and you rinse it out. You put in a seat, like a finisher, basically, and then you hang them out to dry. And once they're dry, you can scan them, or you can. That's when you would go into the dark room, like you see in Stranger Things, where Jonathan's making those prints, because you take. It's like one of those old school. I don't know if you ever remember in math class or something where your teacher would write with like the expo marker and it'd shine the light through and then onto the board.
Oh, the transparencies.
Yeah, those ones. So it's basically like that, where you put the negative in up top and it shines this light down through it and it reflects it onto the photosensitive paper at the bottom. And then you can, this is like the original dark room. And in those dark rooms, you could do all the things you could do in like Adobe's Lightroom or Adobe's Photoshop, where you could make parts of the film or parts of the print at this point be darker if you need to. You can make it lighter to make the contrast balance out to what you want. You could edit it basically using like all physical processes.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
So unfortunately, I've never had an opportunity to mess around with actually doing prints like that, mainly because photo enlargers like that are super expensive and not everyone has one. And then on top of that, you need more development chemicals development paper to make the print itself. But it's something I would love to do in the future because it's just such a cool. The process of film is just what I think draws so many people in, and being able to control. Because even when you're developing, the time it takes when you're putting the chemicals through the bath, when you're putting the film through the chemical bath, I should say, those can affect the photo. So if you leave it in there longer, the photo might turn out darker. If you don't leave it in there as long, it might turn out brighter. And you have all this control over the product and the finished product you want. But nowadays, most labs will do it for you. So they have like these big industrial machines that they'll run your film through, where no humans really are hands-on for the development process at all. And then they take care of it for you.
So do they also have those photo enlargers? Because I'm assuming you're sending like the little roll in, right, to your 1 hour print job or wherever you're doing it. Are they using that same process to, like, I assume, send you some like 4x6s or whatever size you ask them for? Or does it kind of like digitize it?
Yeah, they'll just digitize it, which you don't need the photo enlarger process for. Because nowadays what you can do, and I actually have a setup for this, but you just can scan those negatives, kind of like how you would scan a document. You'd scan those negatives, and then that uploads it to the computer. And then from the computer, you can just print it off that way. So you don't need to take that extra step of, because there's no way to automate that printing process with like the enlargers. That just requires human interaction. But once you can digitize it, then you can just have the computer print it off like you would print a normal piece of paper, just on that photo paper.
When you send in your film to get digitized, essentially, are they also sending you back the negatives?
Yes, they are. They'll send you back. So they'll develop the negatives, and then you'll get that back along with the digitized photos. Or if you wanted prints, they'll get the prints and the negatives. But you always are getting your negatives back because like it's like the original file essentially.
Just curious, like, where are you actually sending it to? Or is it?
Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of different labs. There's some online ones for people who live in like rural areas where there's not like an actual, because nowadays photo labs are hard and few to come by, despite the fact that they used to be everywhere. You can take them even to Walgreens or any kind of drugstore. Most of them still do some form of developing. However, they don't use the nicest equipment. And it's just like any kind of thing. Like if you take it off to a designated area, they're going to have more of the higher quality gear to get you the better scan, to get you the better digitized photo without losing any pixels, essentially. So I have a couple labs here in Portland that I'll take them to. I go to Citizen Photo a lot. They're pretty cheap while still doing a really good job.
Nice. Shout out Citizen Photo.
And then there's like the Dark Room. That's a pretty popular online store. So if you don't have one nearby, you can just send. They have this little printout sheet. You print that out. Tells them, you write on there what kind of development you want. Put your film in a little envelope with that, and then you ship it off to them, and then they'll send it back to you.
Kernan, you kind of mentioned earlier that everyone also has a digital camera, aka the iPhone, in their pocket.
True.
I have an Android, Hans. I have an Android.
Oh, excuse me. I shouldn't have got so specific with the brand there, but everyone has a camera in their pocket that can take digital photos. Can you just talk a little bit about what draws you to the film photography over, a digital?
The classic question, the age-old question, any film photographer.
And you do both, I know, like you still take digital pictures, but like what
and
is
I have like a
designated
digital camera too. But yeah, no, it's a fair question to ask because there is like this ease and like technology's come so far with cameras that there's so many more settings and user accessibility settings on those digital cameras. However, I think what draws me to film is that there's more of that process to it. And initially when I was first getting into it, one of the things that I love so much is it goes back to like that mystery of what's on the roll. When you go out with like your phone or a digital camera, you can take the photo and then immediately look at it. And this will get you into the habit of like, oh, I can fix it in post. Like, oh, this is pretty good. I like this shot, but I'll throw a filter on it later. I'll just throw something on it later to just make it pop a little more, right? And so when you're going out with like that film camera, it's really good modality in a way to get you into the focus of fixing it in pre, essentially. So like taking that time to like line up that shot perfectly without cropping it. And it also keeps you in the moment more. Like I think for me, when I go out with a digital camera, I can just take photos of literally anything. But with a film, you get 35 shots or 36 shots most of the time, 24 or 36. Or medium format, which is like 12, can be down to 8 shots per roll. And so it just makes you more meticulous about what you're shooting. And I think about another thing that kind of inspired me into photography was that movie, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
In which the main character goes on a hunt for this film negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when he finally finds a guy, he's up in, I forget what mountain range, but he's like lining up the shot for the snow leopard, right?
Yep. I know
And
exactly what you're talking about.
and then he just lets it go. So there's this moment when he like looking at the snow leopard, and then he, instead of pressing the shutter button, he just lets it go. And when I first watched it, I'm like, that's dumb. You should have just taken the photo and then watched it. Which I think in the moment when it's a snow leopard is easier to say. But as I've taken more film photography and I've gone out more and taken more photos, I realized that you have this limited number of shots on a roll. And sometimes there's these moments that I'm like, oh, this might look cool. But then I like get down into the details and I'm like, this probably wouldn't end up looking that great on film, and I couldn't capture it due to the lighting or whatever circumstance. So then I put my camera down and I just enjoy the moment. And I think sometimes with digital, I'll just like try and, even in the moment, just try and make it work on my phone. I'm like, oh, how can I edit this, instead of just taking that time to enjoy the moment. So for me, that film photography is just every moment along the way, you're just focused on what you're doing. So whether it be taking, developing the photo, scanning the photo, or then finally editing the photo, it's just like you get to be there for the whole process, and you're not speeding it along. There's no rush with it. And so that to me is what draws me in, along with like the mystery of it. Like I think I would get discouraged with myself so much more frequently if I was shooting digital. And I go out, shoot a bunch of digital, I'm looking at the photos in the moment, come home, look at them again, I'm like, I just seen them too much and I get sick of them. Whereas film, I'll take the shot and I'll be like, I don't know if that's going to turn out well. I hope it does, but I have to wait to see. And then, like I said, it goes back to that. Like I send that roll off to the lab to get developed, and then I'm shooting another roll in the meantime. And then, like I said, if I didn't like that last roll, it doesn't discourage me because I got another roll ready to see what mysteries are on that one. And it just like is like this self-motivating hobby for me, and it's awesome.
You know, something you mentioned with your, like, you know, you're taking it on your digital phone. You can change a lot of settings on your phone before you even take the photo.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that you think about when you're taking the film photo that like you either can or can't adjust? Like, I just don't know what all your options are.
Yeah, no. And I think the best way to describe it is like, there's like the technical side, and there's three parts to the technical side that you got to get right for a good photo. And that's your aperture setting, your shutter speed, and then this one really only matters for digital because film it's set, but it's like the film speed, or like the ISO is what it's called. And so on film, you'll see it's like, it'll say like 200 or 400 most of the time. Those are the two most common ISOs. And basically the ISO is referring to how sensitive the film is to light. So the higher you get, the more sensitive it will be, meaning you can take photos in the dark. Kind of confusing, but like with an 1600 speed film, it means it's going to be super receptive to any kind of light that it sees. So that means you won't have to hold the shutter open for too long to absorb the light. You can have a shorter shutter speed. So it kind of makes this triangle, and you're trying to balance that triangle. So you have the shutter speed, which is how long the shutter stays open to allow the light to hit the film. You have the aperture, which is just like the lens, and the lens will do this thing where it like changes how much light can go through. So this is like a large opening, and this would be on film. It's going to be something like 2.8. It's going to be a really large aperture, which means lots of light can get in. And these are good for those low light shots. So if you have like a 2.8 aperture with like a 1600 film speed, that means you'll be able to get more light in a short amount of time, which is good because the longer you have your shutter speed open for, the more you can like have camera shakes or camera wobbles. Because if you're shooting like one whole second, which basically means your shutter's opening for 1 second and then it closes, and all that light is coming in during that 1 second and getting exposed onto the film before you close it, and then that's what makes the photo, right? So you have to balance all those for the settings. So if you're like taking a nighttime concert shot, you're going to want to have a high-speed film to pick up any kind of light that's at the concert venue. You're going to want to have a shutter speed that's open for the not too long of a time to catch any bumps from the crowd or something. So you want it to be short. And then you're going to want to have an aperture. The aperture also affects another thing, which is called the depth of field. So You probably know, most people know what depth of field is because like it's like that blur, with like portrait mode on your iPhone, you get like that blur in the background. So that blur is when you have it's called a shallow depth of field. So that's like that 2.8 aperture when it's wide open, you'll get like the nice blurred background with your subject in focus. And then if you go to like a 28 aperture when it's like really tiny, there's not enough there's not going to be a lot of depth of field. So everything will be in focus and you'll get no blurriness. So that is also something to factor in. So if you're taking portrait shots of someone, you're going to want to have a wide aperture, which also means that there's going to be a lot of light coming in. So then you'll have to reduce your shutter speed so you don't get what's called an overexposed photo, which is funny. Like right now, my hand, this is a perfect example of like overexposed because there's so much light that it just looks like a white, bright, you can't really make out any details of it. Versus like back here, where it's definitely darker, but you can make out the details of the house. This is like properly exposed. And I think it's funny that I'm outside at this moment because it really helps show off what I'm talking about.
For anyone listening, Kernan has his arm in the sunlight and it is bright white, so you can't really make out anything. So that's what he's talking about with exposure. That is
exactly. And so like my camera's picking up, it's trying to put my face into the proper exposure, being you can see the details even though I'm in the shadow. And so the camera right now is having to compensate basically, and it's making a choice between the really, really bright highlights, like the white on my shirt, versus the really, really dark of this. And so that's what you're doing when you're shooting your camera. You're trying to take a look at the lighting, and you want everything that you're shooting to be properly exposed, which is like, in this case, would be my face, was what the camera's trying to properly expose. And otherwise, you might get like, going back to that triangle, right? So if you have like your aperture too wide, you're going to get really blown out highlights like this. And it's going to be super white and you're not going to be able to see anything in the photo. Or if it's too dark and you don't let enough light come in because like your aperture was too short or your shutter speed was went like that too fast, then it's not going to make a good photo. Because you have like basically photography is just painting with light. So you're painting the negative with the light in the sky.
That was one of my fun facts earlier, Kernan.
Oh yeah,
photography
painting with light
breaks down to painting with light. Yeah, so exactly. I'm glad you bring that up.
So you have to, which puts this really interesting limitation on the process of film because, and that's where digital and like your phone in your pocket have really seen that spike in popularity is because they're able to take photos in really low light settings and like have some like some of it is the physical properties of the camera that are able to capture the light in the low light settings. And some of it's just the post products and like the automatic stuff that Apple does to compensate for like on an Apple phone, for example. But anyway, so when I'm out there taking a photo, the whole process is you got to make that triangle of aperture, shutter speed, and film speed balance out so you get a properly exposed photo. And then the other thing I wanted to add about that is nowadays on your phone with digital, you get a little bit more control because essentially on film, since the film speed is already set when you buy the film, either 100, 200, 800, 400, whatever it is, you can't change that. So you have to make the aperture and the shutter speed work with your film. But that's the advantage of digital because on digital, you're allowed to change that ISO setting. So if on your digital camera, if you're going out on a hike at noon and you're going to take photos on your hike, you can put your ISO to low because you don't need it to be super sensitive because there's so much light in the air or light around in the sky. But if, like I said, going back to that concert photography, if you're at a concert show and you're wanting to take it, you could crank that ISO all the way up to like 1600. So that way it's super sensitive to any kind of light. And then you could have the lower shutter speed so you don't get any camera wobbles. And then you could even open your aperture at that point because you have so much control over the other two. Does that kind of, I hope that helps a little bit.
That definitely helps. Thank you for explaining those technical terms too, because that is definitely something that is new to me. So I can understand regarding film photography, it sounds like the aperture and the shutter speed are properties of the camera itself, but is the ISO a property of the film? And then you buy a specific ISO when you're doing film photography?
So that's pretty much it, except I will note that there's one little caveat with that. When we're talking about the camera, there's like two parts to the camera. There's the camera and then there's the lens. And the lens controls the aperture while the camera controls the shutter speed. And I only say this as an important distinction because you can switch out lenses in cameras. You can put some lenses on some cameras, can't put them on others. And really, at the end of the day, what it comes down to is it's really easy to make a shutter open and close. That's a pretty simple mechanic that everyone's figured out. So, like, the camera itself is nothing more than a box with a hole in it to let light in. The lens is far more important than the camera itself. I mean, there's obviously caveats kind of depending on what you're wanting to do. But since most cameras just have like different shutter speed options, you don't need to focus about it too much because they all fall within the same range. They're like, you have your bulb setting on the camera box, which is like that that's when you do the really fun photography because you can hold the shutter open as long as you want. So if you've ever seen a photo of like star trails in the night sky, that was shot on a shutter speed using bulb, where the person will probably hold the shutter open for like a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And that's when you get those cool photos in the sky where you can see the stars, not the stars rotating, obviously the Earth rotating, but you get the star trails because they're like leading it by. And yeah, camera's just a box with a light in it. But the glass on the lens actually does matter some because if you get high quality glass, that's when you get those really, really sharp, really, really high detailed photos that not all camera manufacturers make. And you don't always need it to be that fancy kind of glass. But if you're going into like the really detailed or really artistic or trying to make a living off photography, you're going to want to start spending more money on that fancy glass to make sure you get those nice, crisp shots.
Kernan, I'm kind of wondering if a camera is a fancy box with a hole in it. Why is like I've always heard like Leica is a top tier film camera, but what like makes a Leica better than a Kodak, or why is there such a difference or a cult following for a specific kind of film camera?
It's funny that you say that because I was ready to talk about the red dot gang. That's what I mean. Leicas are famous for having the little red dot as their brand, and Leicas. There's two parts to Leicas. The first part, if we're talking about the camera itself, people really like what's known as like the ergonomics or how the camera works. And so like whenever you crank that shutter button, whenever you click the shutter button or crank the film advance and click the shutter button, like the way that feels and how smooth the mechanics of the camera operate, it's almost like a Swiss watch in that sense. It's like how nice it works, how long it will last. Cause like I've worked with cameras that have like a felt or like a cotton shutter, and those can get ripped, they can break. I know Leica uses like titaniums for their shutters, so they're less likely to get damaged. So there's some quality with the box with the hole in it, right?
Yeah.
But the real thing for Leica is their glass of their lenses. They partner with like it's called Zeiss, Zeiss, Zeiss lenses, and they are just like phenomenal glass. They're really sharp photos. They have the mechanics of the aperture settings it goes back to the ergonomics of the camera itself. They're really well designed to the point where they won't break, won't jam, won't have problems. And you're able with Leica cameras to get these super duper sharp photos and really nice photos with the camera you get. But mainly it comes down to the glass they use and the lenses they use. And so when it comes to like that cult following, like they're expensive cameras, but they are really well made. And part of it is just like your classic brand, people just want it for the brand. And there's other companies that make really good cameras too, but they don't have like that cult following, the brand recognition that the Leicas do, just because they've been around for so long. They've made film cameras and now they're making digital, and they've always been at that super high standard.
Sure. Are you part of that cult? Is that what you use?
No, I am nowhere near rich enough to afford a Leica camera. It's so funny. I have. So one thing that you'll notice is in film photography, there's so many different cameras, but so many of them are super similar. So I have what's called a Canon 7. Film camera came around about in the 1960s, and it's very clearly inspired by the Leica cameras. It looks like a Leica camera. It even has the same screw mount on the camera for the lenses, because sometimes brands will segregate their screw mounts so they can only befit their brand's lenses. So the screw mount I have for my Canon camera can also screw into the Zeiss lenses like that I was talking about. So if I wanted to, I could get those fancy lenses for my Canon camera.
Gotcha.
Basically, my Canon camera was clearly inspired by Leica cameras. So I just have the poor man's Leica, is what I like to say. And if I wanted to, I could get the fancy glass for my poor man's camera and probably get just as good a shot. Because the body, like my camera body might not have as many options for settings. Like some cameras, I think most Leicas come with a built-in light meter. And what a light meter is, that goes back to the triangle. It'll help you show whether the photo is going to be overexposed or underexposed. So when you like look through the viewfinder, it'll have this little, it looks like a number line essentially. And if you want it at 0, which means it's properly exposed.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you change like the shutter speed or the aperture size, it'll move that arrow up and down. And so you use that to balance it to get to the 0. And so the light meter helps you take the better shots. My camera doesn't have one, my knockoff one, but most Leicas do. And how good the light meter is also kind of affects the price point of the camera.
I wonder if that takes out some of the artistic value of like you taking the shots. Like if it sets you up to be like a perfect shot every time, I wonder if it kind of like dulls your creativity, or if it actually is good enough that it's like, this is what you should really be taking.
Yeah, it doesn't tell you at all what to take, right? Because the thing about light meters, especially in-camera light meters, is they are metering for the whole entire scene. And metering and light metering is definitely the most challenging part of taking a film photo, because it's really easy on a digital camera to, like, when you look through and you're looking at the screen or you're looking at your phone, right, you'll see what the camera sees. And so if it's too dark, you got to bump up that exposure. You got to get more light coming in. Well, with film, when you look through the viewfinder, you just see what's there. You're not seeing your camera's interpretation of it. So the light meter helps you, like most professional film photographers, or not even just film, all photographers, all professional ones will use a handheld light meter. And with that, they can get specific meterings of the scene. So if you're taking a shot of like a sunset, right, you're gonna, or maybe not a sunset, but let's say like a house during sunset. So like you're gonna find those points of reflection where the sun is reflecting. Those are gonna be really bright compared to like the shadows. And so if you use your camera's built-in light meter, most of the time they're metering the whole scene as an average. So you could meter the whole scene, and if it's like a bright day, but you're shooting in the shadows, what's going to happen is your camera's going to pick up on all the light coming in from just like the little bits of sky that are out there. And that's going to change the exposure because, like I said, your camera's reading the full scene. If you want your exposure to be super specific on a certain part, you're going to want to meter closer and then compensate on your camera. So that's why you'll see sometimes they'll hold this little thing with like a white bulb on the end, and they'll be pointing that around in different areas. And that measures how much reflected light is coming off the surface. So that way, that helps you give a more specific metering of the scene versus the average. Because when you do the average, you can get blowouts and it can be super overexposed, because like that's what my laptop camera is doing right now, is it's taking this whole scene that you're seeing and measuring the average, which is why you get these parts that are overexposed, because it's not super precise, versus using a handheld light meter. You can meter individual, and then that's up to you as the cameraman. So you're worried that about it like taking away from that creativity, but it just kind of creates a new avenue, and it helps you interpret the scene so you can focus, or you as the artist can expose it to what you need exposed.
Kernan, thanks for explaining a lot of those like technical things, because that is completely new to me. It's really interesting. There's a lot of creativity, a lot of like kind of science going into it, which I really appreciate. Yeah. On the flip side, maybe a little less of the technical, a little more of the creative, but do you have any kind of memorable photo shoots or any photos in particular that you think of that has a good story behind it, or anything that's really sparked your creativity?
Yeah, I do have one. Let me see if I can. So I took this photo in our hometown of Boise. I chose this photo to talk about because for me, I get a great deal of enjoyment with film photography when I get those photos back and I've basically seen that I've mastered that triangle, right? So the exposure is really hard, and it takes a lot of practice to nail down and to get that properly exposed photo. And it is kind of like a science, because when you get it right, you'll get back this photo where all the things you wanted are in focus, they're well lit, you can see them, and there's nothing left out that you don't want. So hitting that perfect exposure is something that you will see once you get your film back. And so with this photo I took, it was at night, which night photography on film is super hard because you gotta leave the shutter open a long time to let all the light in, but you don't want to leave it open too long because if you leave it open too long, you get blown out highlights and you don't get any detail in the shadows. And so this one I sent you is a picture of a motel sign, neon lighting, which is always really cool on film to get those neon lights to pop, because that's another aspect of film that is people enjoy over digital, is what's called like I think it's the dynamic range is what it's called. And the dynamic range of film basically is how many colors it can show off or how much variety allows in the lighting. So a film has a super large dynamic range, meaning you can get a lot of detail in the shadows as well as detail in the highlights without under or overexposing it. Compared to the same shot on digital, you might have to take a couple photos and layer them to get the same or to get the balance of light to dark areas. So anyway, so when I took this photo, I'd like driven past this sign pretty much all my life. And I was like, that's always a cool looking sign. And I finally one night, I was just like, I'm going to go for a little night drive and take photos of just spots in my hometown that I've seen all this time and I thought would make really, not necessarily like beautiful photos, but just really cool ones that reflected our town, as well as just practicing my night photography. And so when I got this photo back and I realized that I nailed the exposure and everything I wanted to was properly lit and the shadows were there, as well as the composition was there, because the camera I shot this on is what's known as a medium format camera. So it's a bigger negative, which means there's more detail in it. And also it's a single lens versus when you look through a normal camera, you look through the viewfinder into a mirror that reflects down into another mirror that reflects out through the lens. So you're always seeing the same image when you look through the viewfinder as what's going to be taken. But with a single lens, so since it only reflects once, you get a mirrored view when you're looking through the viewfinder of the camera I took that shot on. And so trying to compose when you're moving it around and it's mirrored is a little more challenging than viewing it straight on. So getting that composition right, getting the exposure right, I was like, I think I nailed it all. I think I got it all. I did all the math to make sure I held the shutter open long enough to get all the right lighting in. And then when I got it back and all the colors were popping just the way I imagined them and all the lighting was perfect. And I was just like, wow, that's it. And it felt like like very, I don't know, concrete process where it's like this, you got to be able to use the tools. And I felt like when I took that photo and I got back exactly what I wanted, I was like, I mastered this camera. Like I figured out, I was able to get all the settings right to get the highest quality photo I could. And then at that point, once you've mastered the camera, then you're really free to explore your artistic side with it because you know how to use the equipment basically.
Absolutely. And I'll post this on our Instagram if anyone wants to see, but it is just a beautiful shot. Like the lighting works so well of the capturing that neon just absolutely pops. So you got some like cool oranges, some cool blues. And the fact that you took this during night too is just, it's a very impressive photo. So I'll share that if anyone wants to see. I'll do better than this.
Oh, that's sick.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's very cool.
Yeah, it just totally pops. Kernan, obviously this podcast is kind of about diving into a new hobby every week. So what's kind of the elevator pitch for picking up film photography?
Well, see, that photo I sent you, that's like, there's two sides to it. Because like there's like this solitude practice with film photography that you can get when you just like want to go out by yourself with a camera and have something to do and go and shoot around. And it can really satisfy that creative in you. If you're looking for some creative outlet just to appreciate the moment and appreciate like the city you live in, or if you're going on vacation, you can go out and take that with you. Because I've taken lots of photos on just like that one I took was on like a more expensive medium format film camera, but I really also enjoy just finding, like, if you go to thrift stores, you'll be able to find these cheap little not disposable, but they look like disposable cameras, but you can keep refilling them with different film. They're called point and shoots. And those ones are so fun to just bring with you around, where you don't have to, again, focus on the result of the film or the shot. You can just take a photo and move on. And like when you came out here with our friends from high school, Hans, and we walked around town going to the bars, I had a little camera with me that I took photos on, and it's just like really great to capture those moments with those friends. And then you can print those photos off, and then you have like the little physical reminder. And living in that this digital age, it's really, we've lost like that physical aspect of like those treasured memories. And being able to like print off a photo that you've taken when you were out with your friends and hold it in your hand and just like have this physical memory is just unmatched to me, honestly. And I still have like this stack of photos that I've printed out that I'll go back through every once in a while. And it's just like a little physical time capsule of times in my life. And I think if you're looking to capture moments and while still being present in the moments in life, film photography is perfect for that. You're not weighed down by your phone and a screen and looking at that. You're still looking at what's really happening, and you're not letting yourself get distracted. So you get to enjoy the moment more.
That is so wholesome. Thank you, Kernan, for sharing that.
Yeah.
I know me and Paul talked about this, and I need to do better about this, but I'm definitely a guy who, pulls out the camera and then just like takes 1,000 photos, hoping one of them is good. But instead of getting one good photo, I get 1,000 mediocre ones. So I feel like directly spoken to is like in film photography, you take the time, you set it up, you do the math, you do the science to actually get the one good shot. So I feel inspired by that.
No, and I think that math and like it's just such a good. There's not a lot of things out there that hobbies, whatever you want to call them, that really allow you to use both your left and right brain, as people like to say, because where you have to be creative, think about what you want to shoot. Because I've done some shots or some photo shoots where I've like set up something. Like one time I had all my friends dress up as different fruit, and then I brought that fruit out and held the fruit, and then they took photos with the fruit.
That's awesome.
And so like finding like those creative ways while still being able to like get the science of the film right and being able to expose it properly and get all the science components right to get the shot together requires both parts of your brain. So it really, I mean, you can do this with digital cameras too. It doesn't have to be film, but like getting the left and the right brain working so you get all the settings right while still thinking creatively is another aspect of film photography that I just love.
Yeah, absolutely. Kernan, would you give a shout out, any plugs, either personal or other creators, anyone who's inspired you in film?
Red Dot Colt.
Yeah.
No, don't buy a Leica. Just go on eBay and get something cheaper. But I'd say there's three. Yeah, I'll give you 3 plugs. So first one is a YouTuber. His name is the YouTube channel is called Negative Feedback. I don't think he posts as much anymore, but he used to post for a while. He just did camera reviews and things like that. But then he really started. He's from England, and he just started to get way more creative with how he used YouTube as a modality for content creation, as well as his photos in general. Because I especially liked him because he really goes for the creativeness, and he's super creative in the art that he creates. And he's always pushing the boundary of art while still using film photography most of the time. But he never lets that define what he shoots. He's trying to make the art for himself. So check out Negative Feedback. He's got a lot of great resources if you're looking to buy a camera or just get creative and get inspired creatively, I should say. And then the other plug I'll give is these next 2 are Instagram. I would check out Colton Rothwell on Instagram. He's actually someone I knew back in Boise. I don't think he posts as much of his film photography content either. He's shifted more into prints, but his Instagram is full of great photography shots, and it's someone I know personally. And it's really cool because that's the other aspect of film photography I love is there's lots of film photo groups in town. I was part of one in Boise that you can walk around and shoot photos with other people and getting you out there meeting people. So having someone who I knew and I could show my photos to, he showed me his photos, and he's really good. I'd check him out. And then the other one, this guy's digital, but he really pushes the envelope, I think, in nighttime photography. He does a really good job of going out and capturing scenes at night. And his Instagram is Castle Systems. I don't know him personally, but I've really found his content to be super inspiring and kind of led me. You'll see the influence of his photos if you check him out. That inspired me to take the photo that I shared with you today.
Amazing. Kernan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I just talked your ear off about film photography.
I love it. I actually learned so much. The technical side especially was something I'm super unfamiliar with, but now I love it. I loved learning about that. So thank you. And best of luck on your next shoot.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me, y'all. I had a great time.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the This Week I'm Into podcast, and a huge thank you to Fritsch for sharing his passion on photography. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for the next episode, please reach out at thisweekiminto@gmail.com. And please give us a follow on Instagram at thisweekiminto. Please rate us 5 stars and share this episode with a friend. We're doing our best to grow the podcast, and your help really goes a long way. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. And now, a word from our sponsor. But legally, they don't actually sponsor us.
Okay, Hans, that was a great shoot we did for you today. We are definitely going to convince People magazine to replace you for John Krasinski as this year's sexiest man of the year.
I do think the haircut I just got was great, but I don't know if it's good enough. It was weird having everyone stare at me while you took the photos.
Oh, Hans, you don't have to be worried about that. Picture this. You walked in. Jawline sharper than a Leica lens, giving the smoldering look. I swear, everybody was starstruck. Frozen. But don't be nervous, because you know what they were all really staring at?
Don't tell me. The Leica?
The Leica, exactly. That camera was stealing the show. I mean, the shots it gets, every single photo, a work of art. It was like the Leica knew exactly how to capture every angle, every detail, just perfection.
That's the thing with Leicas. With the built-in light sensor and all your adjustable options, they make you look like the world's greatest photographer and me the world's sexiest man. Who needs Photoshop when you have Leica, right?
Exactly. You could have been eating a bowl of cereal without a spoon and it would have still looked like an album cover. The camera really helps me make art.
See, that's why Leica's the choice. It's not just for taking pictures, it's for capturing greatness. They take handsome to a whole new level.
Handsome, more like iconic. I swear, Hans, these shots could hang in a museum.
So, what you're saying is, I look like the world's sexiest man.
Hans, with a Leica, you look better than the world's sexiest man. Trust me, this camera does magic.
Well, there you have it, folks. Don't settle for anything less. Get a Leica, capture greatness, look legendary.
I like a Leica.